Today is October 12th, 2022, and this is Sandra Lafky Carlson. I'm here at the Tualatin Heritage Center in Tualatin, Oregon, with Mike Lofton, and we are here to do an oral history interview with Dianne Barry, and who's a resident of Tualatin and has been for years, and so she's here to tell us some of her stories about her life. So welcome, Diane, and thank you.
Thank you.
So would you start by telling us where you were born, where you grew up, a little about your family of origin?
Okay, well, I was born in Montana, actually on an Indian reservation, but I was not Indian. It was a town that developed on the reservation, and so I grew up in Hamilton, Montana, and all my grade school, high school activities were there. My father owned his own bank in Hamilton, and my mother, of course, taught school for 2 years before they were married, and then in those days, once you were married, you could not work if you were a woman. So she raised me and my two sisters. We always lived in town, and I lived 2 blocks from the grade school one direction, 2 blocks from the high school in the other direction. So regardless of the weather in Montana, I always was able to go to school. Sometimes the school buses didn't run, but the town kids always could get to school.
How much snow did you have in that part of Montana?
Well, I lived in a valley. There was 9,000-foot mountains all the way around, and elevation was about 3,500 feet. So it was fairly well protected. So we never got much more than a foot. So, but you know, you had to wear galoshes to school, and then in the cloakroom, you always had to take off your galoshes, your heavy winter coats, hang them up, let them drip dry out there in the hallway, and off to the classroom you'd go.
And it was your grade school had several classes. It wasn't.
Oh, the grade school was 1 through 8.
Oh.
So it was a 2-story building, yeah.
Okay. And so what were your hobbies and interests? What did you and your sisters do?
Oh, one of the early things we did was roller skating, you know, except in the wintertime, of course. And then we had sleds, and in the winter, Dad would go out on the country roads and pull the sleds behind the car. And I'm sure that, these days, nobody would even think about doing that, but that was the big thing, you know, on a Sunday afternoon, you'd go for a big sled ride. And of course, there was always snow on the road, so it always worked well.
And roller skating you do on the sidewalks?
Oh yeah. So, although with the town that my mother grew up in, which was about 120 miles north of where I lived, they had still, I can remember when I was really little, they still had wooden sidewalks. And I tried roller skating there, but it was blah, 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 blah. Didn't work very well at all. But Hamilton was much more civilized and had sidewalks. And there was Marcus Daly was the big part owner of the Anaconda Copper Mine. And he had horses and stable and a racehorse. He was a very, very wealthy man. And so he had developed Hamilton, and so it always had a wide main street, sidewalks, very, very well developed for a small town.
What was his name again?
Marcus Daly, D-A-L-Y. One of the copper kings.
And I suppose there's still copper mines there in Montana, would you know?
Butte has a mine. I presume that it's copper that they get out of there, although there's other things too. that I never really paid much attention to.
Mhm. So, so you grew up there, you went to high school there?
Yeah, yep.
And, and then did you, after high school, did you go to college? Did you work? Did you have a career?
I went off to a girls' college in Missouri for 2 years, Stevens College, and then back to the University of Montana, where both my parents had graduated from, and got a degree in medical technology. Then I went on to Spokane for a year of internship, which is where I met my husband. He was also interning in medical technology. And so after my year of internship, I came home and told my parents, I'm getting married. So we got married in 1955, and then I moved to Pullman, Washington, where my husband was then in graduate school. And we spent 2 years there, and then he went on to graduate school at Ohio State. So we spent 5 years in Columbus. And then, as my father used to put it, he finally got a job at age 32 in Seattle. And we were there for a couple of years, where we adopted our 2 daughters. And then we moved to LA, and he got a job in the hospital down there. And then we adopted 2 boys down there. So our family grew and grew. We had all 4 kids within 3.5 years. But there's a 7-year age range with them. So,
But you were busy.
yes.
Parenting.
Yep. I didn't work after we moved to Seattle. So,
And what exactly, your husband was Art?
yeah.
Art
Yeah.
Barry.
Yeah.
And what exactly did he do in his field?
He was a microbiologist, and he had a PhD in microbiology, and at the University of California, Davis, he taught in the medical school, and he taught microbiology to the medical students.
And so you were busy at home raising 4 children.
Yeah.
And what were their names?
Karen and Kathy and Bill and Brian. KKBB.
And so, what did you do as a family? Did you have any time to have fun? It sounds like you were both very busy, but did you enjoy doing things together?
Oh yeah, yeah. First 5 years actually, as a family, we lived in Los Angeles. So about once a year we would go down to Disneyland, which had just opened a couple of years earlier. And it was, the big exciting thing. And in those days they still had A, B, C, D tickets. And so the E-ticket was the one that would work on all the rides. Otherwise, like if you had just little kiddie rides, then you could use an A ticket. I did a lot of sitting with the baby while everybody else rode on things because there really wasn't room for a stroller on the rides.
Yeah. And was Bill the baby?
No,
Bill
Brian.
is the only one of your children I know.
Yeah, he's number 3.
Okay.
And there's Brian, yeah.
Brian is the
Yeah.
baby. So at some point you ended up in Oregon, and how did that happen, and when was that?
Okay, Art worked with the medical school at Davis for about 14 years. And he was one of the first ones when they opened up the medical school. There was a whole bunch of us came in all at one time. I think the school district must have just panicked because we all came in, we all had young families, and really inundated the city. But he was there for 14 years, and then he had done a lot of research with some of his fellows that he had met through national committees. Mm-hmm. And so finally he was getting a little frustrated with the medical school personnel, and so he said two of his friends were up here in Portland, and so they said, I think because of all the research we're all doing and trying to group it all together, let's open our own lab. So they did. They opened a lab up here, and because there was 2 people in Portland already, that became the hub. And we said we'd go to Portland any day. Art had been born and raised in Spokane, and of course me in Montana, we were both ready to get up out of California anyway. So he opened up his lab, and he ran it for 20 years till he retired at age 70, and then his partners continued, and actually the lab just this year has finally closed down after 40 years of doing research in microbiology and different antibiotics.
Oh my goodness.
And he wrote 460 articles for medical magazines and 1 textbook.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
He did a lot of publishing. He was very, very well known, on national committees and things like that.
No.
And after the kids were in school, then by the time the youngest one finally got into school, that was about the time that California put Prop 13 through and decided that they've got to save money, so they sold all the school buses, fired all the librarians, and really reduced everything. So I talked to the principal and I said, well, what do you got to be to be a library clerk? And he said, well, what you've been doing, volunteering in there for the last 6 years. So I said, well, can I apply for the job? And he said, sure. And next thing I knew, I had the job. So for about 6 years, I was the library clerk and read stories to the kids and helped them check out books and all that stuff.
Oh, good.
Then when we moved up here, Art said, I really need an extra hand in the lab. So I went back to my medical technology training and worked part-time in the lab with him. And then in about 1993 or so, I discovered there was a place called Medical Teams International. And I thought, that sounds like something I would be interested in. And then I was there yesterday. I've been there 30 years as a volunteer. Yep.
Oh my goodness. And now those are the teams that go to other places? Or
Other countries,
place?
yep. I have always just worked in the warehouse. But yeah, they serve indigenous people all over the world. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And so you, in the warehouse, you put together supplies?
Actually, with my medical background, I do a lot of sorting. As stuff comes in from labs and hospitals and things like that, it'll be just, if they have surgery and they've got a great big bundle of supplies that they've used in surgery and half of it has been unused. Well, they can't use it again. So they ship it all off to medical teams. Well, then a bunch of us sort it out into bandages here and drapes there and all that sort of thing. And then the other half of the warehouse pack things and all the box of bandages to go off to wherever is needed, things like that. So we process it. So.
Well, can you name a few of the places that these supplies have gone to around the world?
Well, I know they've gone to Kenya a lot, and at the moment Guatemala, and I think Sudan, and it varies from year to year. So.
And there are a team of.
Well, there's all sorts of medical team that go with them. I've never gone, never offered. That's out beyond my capacity.
Yeah, that would be challenging.
Yeah.
But you're still doing that.
Yeah.
Oh,
I thoroughly enjoy it. I've got friends, one gal that I work with, she and I have both been there 30 years as of this year. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's very impressive.
Yeah.
And so so your children, of course, have all grown and gone on to their lives.
Yeah.
And where are they now?
Well, our two daughters actually live together. One of them has never been married. The other one's been married 4 times.
So it balances out.
Yeah, it does indeed. But they're natural sisters because my children are adopted. But they are, and we got them when they were 2.5 and 3.5 years old. And they live together in Sacramento. And well, actually, they live in Woodland and work in Sacramento. One of them worked for the police department as a dispatcher for years and years. Well, she dispatched for about 7 years. Then she trained all the dispatchers, etc. for about 30 years. Finally retired about a year ago, and now she works for the district attorney's office part-time because she can't work full-time anymore. Theoretically, she's retired.
Yes.
So, and then the other daughter is a dental assistant, and she's worked for dentists, several different ones in Sacramento for years. Our sons, the oldest one, our number 3 child is Bill. He lives here. He's currently working as a travel agent, but he's worked for a lot of different things and thoroughly enjoys acting when he has a chance to do it. Now with COVID on, he hasn't done any acting in the last years, but he's done a lot in little theaters around the Portland area.
Yes, I've seen him, seen him act, and he's very good.
Yeah, he loves it. He started when he was about 7 years old, when he was 2nd grade. They put on a little Christmas play, and he was the father in the night before Christmas. And that got him the bug, I think. After that, he just, this is my calling. Whenever there was a play, he was center stage. So,
and then Brian is the youngest.
Brian is the youngest. He's 2 years younger than Bill, and he is in southern LA. And he is old age insurance, medical insurance for elderly, and works there and has a girlfriend that he's lived with. Also, he has a daughter, and that's my only grandchild, only granddaughter. I have 2 grandsons and 1 granddaughter. She has just gotten her master's from Harvard, and she's hoping to get into the CIA. But I'm not supposed to say that. But she is a very, very bright gal, very, very intelligent.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then my 2 grandsons are both in Sacramento, and one of them is an insurance salesman like his father is, and the other one works for the county sanitation department. He's working up in different levels, getting his different degrees of ability.
Experience
And
and ability.
so, yeah. And he and his wife now have a little boy, so I have a great grandchild.
Oh,
He has
my
just
goodness.
turned 1 year old last month.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so the generations go on.
Have you seen him yet?
Yes. Yep,
You
they
have?
were up here on the 4th of July.
Oh.
And so I got to see him and hold him. And my son Bill came over and tried to hold him too, but he wouldn't let Bill hold him. But his name is Finn,
Oh.
Finn Leland Frazier, and Art's middle name was Leland. And then my granddaughter had a brother whose middle name was Leland also, and he passed away suddenly of a heart attack at 30. And so when little Finn came along, they named him Finn Leland in honor of his great-grandfather and his uncle.
Oh,
So,
that's nice.
yeah.
And you know, your husband Art passed away just a couple of years ago.
A year and a half ago,
Year
yeah.
and a half. But he was very involved in the Tualatin community. I mean, a few years ago, wasn't he on the
Arts
committee?
Yes,
And,
yeah. Yeah, the Geese mural, or whatever you want to call it, in downtown Tualatin, and the triangle has got the Art Council people's names on the plaque, and name is on that plaque because he was on the art committee that managed that, yeah.
Yeah, and so did they select works of art to purchase from the city?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And placed in the
Yeah.
city?
Yeah, he was very involved in the committee, and they would meet monthly and have art shows once a year, and chose different articles of paintings that hung in the walls of the library, and then they got scattered around town, you know, to kind of publicize them and let the kids know that they were appreciated.
Yeah, I think Tualatin has long been very supportive of the arts.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you've been involved in the Historical Society for quite a while, and
Yeah.
did you say about 20 years or so?
Probably about 20 years, yeah, yeah. I was not an original member, but somewhere in the late 90s, I joined it, and we were still a small group then, but it was interesting, and I always liked history. So first I started out as a secretary, and I became the treasurer, and was that for several years, and then vice president, and then for 2 years I was president. Worked a lot longer as the treasurer with Barb Stinger. And always enjoyed it. We always attended all the meetings, and Art was on a member also. So both of us came and to all the meetings.
And you're still coming.
Oh, yeah, I was here this last week.
And you still live in Tualatin?
In my house, yeah.
What made you choose Tualatin to live? Because you could have lived in Portland, where Art was working at the lab, but...
Right. Well, actually, the lab is here, or was here. It's now in Wilsonville. But although the other two fellows that were in the Portland area, one of them was at St. Vincent's and the other at Kaiser, they said, you know, we know about this company that has a warehouse that they would like to, they provided media for bacteria growing, and so they had a building here in Tualatin, and so they they checked it out and decided that would be a good building. So, you know, the building is still here. It's off of Tualatin Sherwood Road. And so we said, you know, that sounds like a good deal. So they built, or we started the lab here, and then outgrew the building. So then they found another building down in the Wilsonville area. And so that's where it was until about 6 months ago, when it finally fizzled out. But we did research for pharmaceutical companies all over the world, and then traveled extensively. We've been in 68 foreign countries.
Oh my goodness.
So Art gave talks all over the world on this research. Yeah.
What was your favorite place to visit?
Well,
most memorable?
I think the most memorable didn't have anything to do with his work. It was going to the Antarctic.
The
Because we
Antarctic.
started out in Chile, went down and got to the Horn, and then the ship went into the under, and we did not get on land. We didn't, but the ship still stayed there in the harbor for about 3 or 4 days. So people from the harbor or from the land came out and talked to us, and then we got to see all the whales and the penguins and all the icebergs.
Oh my goodness.
And then back up to Argentina. So we sailed all the way around the Horn.
That must have been a long trip.
About 3 weeks, yeah.
Okay. Was it very, very cold there?
No, actually, and of course, being on a big cruise ship, we got out to look, and it was probably 34 degrees or so. But as you're standing out there in your jacket, they come along with it, handing you hot chocolate, or would you like a hot toddy, or, trying to keep us all well attended to. But we enjoyed sightseeing out there. And then we got on over to the Shetland Islands, who had been involved in a war a few days or a couple of years earlier. And we were all going to go ashore, but then the wind started to blow, and there wasn't a real harbor for this great big cruise ship to dock at. So they were having to anchor out there and send us all in to shore in little tender boats, little lifeboat type thing. And it was just getting too hard. They had to run the engine to keep the boat from drifting away. And they said, if we run it much longer, we're not going to have enough gas or whatever the fuel was to get us up to Argentina. So they said, we're going to have to get everybody back onto the ship. And so I was a stamp collector in those days. So the fellow from the post office came out, and those of us who were stamp collectors got to buy some stamps from there anyway. And then we all waved goodbye to Shetland Islands and sailed for Argentina.
So there are Shetland Islands off the coast of Argentina?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because
Way
I would
down.
have assumed Scotland.
Oh, no.
Okay.
These are the ones that had the big war.
Oh, yes.
Well, a couple of years before we were there,
Yeah.
which was probably 15 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, what adventures.
Yep.
So you've been living in Tualatin for
38 years.
38 years.
Yeah, we both built a house, and I'm still in it.
And you built it?
Well, we had it built.
built?
Yeah.
Oh,
Steve Stolze built it for us.
okay.
He was the mayor of Tualatin, yeah. And he lived 2 doors down from us. He was a very, very good friend.
And so now you're busy volunteering at the
At medical teams, yeah.
medical teams international, and with the historical society, and
Yep.
and you see family pretty often.
Well, yeah. We had a great big celebration this summer because it was a rather important birthday for me.
Was it?
It was. So they all thought they ought to all get together. So my son and I flew to Montana, and my kids from California flew to Montana. And we all had a big celebration on my 90th birthday.
Oh my goodness! Congratulations. That's and so why did you have family also in Montana? Because it had been years since you.
Well, my 2 sisters are both still there.
Oh.
In fact, one sister, my youngest sister, who actually has a master's degree in teaching and taught overseas for years. She taught with American schools abroad. She taught all over South America and Pakistan and into some of the Russian countries. So she didn't really have a place to settle down back in the States, so she has inherited the house. So the house that I grew up in is still part of the family.
Oh.
And then my other sister, when she got married, her husband was from Butte, and had just graduated from law school, so he was opening a law practice in Butte, of course, so people knew him, and so that's where they lived for 60 years until he passed away. He was a judge there. Yeah. So, yeah. So the family still has lots of Montana ties.
Yes. Well, but you're happy here in Tualatin.
I am very happy. Yep. I love the weather here. It's much nicer than Montana or California. California gets too hot for me, and Montana gets a little cold. So I'm happy, and you know, I'm distant from my family except for one son, but still it pleases me.
Do you ever FaceTime or use Zoom to connect with your family?
On email and a lot of telephone calls. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you have a full life.
I try to keep busy. Yep. I belong to 2 book clubs, so that keeps me busy reading, and so yeah. And the Historical Society, medical teams, so.
Yeah.
And my church. And I was very involved, well, both of us were involved in the church for many years. As it grew up, it started out as a teeny tiny little church in the VFW hall. And then as we got members, we got moved onto this building actually. And we were part of this building for a couple of years until we got enough money and then built our own Presbyterian church down on Boones Ferry.
Okay.
So, yeah. So Art was an elder and I was an elder.
You're very much a part of the community.
Yeah. We decided it was a nice little town and we were very happy here and liked all the people. Yeah.
Can you think of anything else that you want to share about your life or Tualatin or your activities?
Well, Tualatin's been, a great place to live, although we did not raise our children here. Only one child actually came up with us from California. The others had all graduated from high school, were moving on with their lives. Brian was the only one, and he had gone to Jesuit high school in Sacramento, and so he said, well, if there's a Jesuit high school, I'll move up there to California or to Oregon with you, but I'm not staying up there because I don't like rainy weather. So fortunately there was a Jesuit high school. He came up and he played baseball there and had a great time and graduated from there and then went down to Arizona State. And now he lives in Southern California. So he's my sunshine kid.
Well, thank you very much. It's been so interesting, to learn things I didn't know about you and Art. So, really appreciate your giving us your stories.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I've always enjoyed the Historical Society and that part of Tualatin. So,
Good. Well, thank you, Diane.